Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the fifth of the British Council Myanmar Teacher Takeaway webinars. My name is Fraser Buick, and I'll be the facilitator again today. For those of you who have joined us for the previous four webinars, I'd like to offer you a big welcome back, and also a welcome to all of you who are joining for the first time. Now, today's webinar, as you can see from the title slide, is focusing on English in a multilingual world. And this, of course, will have a specific focus on the Myanmar context. Now, let me tell you a little bit about what we're going to do today and today's slides, in case you haven't joined us before. Today is a teacher takeaway webinar, which means that we hope there'll be practical insight into what can support teachers' continuous professional development, and particularly those teachers engaged in English language teaching or other English-related educational contexts, and as I said before, within Myanmar. So we do hope that this webinar will offer local perspectives on global and local topics of interest. And from this, you can take away relevant resources and ideas and tips back to your classroom. Now, today's focus, as I said, is English in a multilingual world, and we'll be focusing on this within multilingual context, primarily in Myanmar, but also with a focus on translanguaging, which is related, of course, to delivery within the classroom. Our speakers today, who I'll introduce in just a moment, will offer principles and practical ideas for our audience to take back to their classroom. So I really hope you find today useful, and again, you can take away something from today's event. Now, before we begin, again, for those of you joining us for the second, third, fourth time, you will have seen these slides before, but we do have to present them to you so you understand fully the nature of today's event. We do ask, in terms of internet and online safety, that you don't share any personal information in the chat box, any contact details, or indeed any promotional messages. We do have moderators with us today, keeping an eye on the chat box for that to try and remove anything that would contravene this housekeeping rule, but we would ask that everyone do pay attention to that. In addition, we ask that everyone is polite and considerate of others in the chats. Of course, we're here. We want to respect each other as peers and professionals and ensure that the event is a safe event for everyone participating. On that note, you will notice that the microphones and cameras are off, and this is to ensure a smooth presentation of the event. So I do apologize for that, because I do realize it takes away some of the interaction. You may find that the hands up function is still working on Zoom, but unfortunately, we won't be able to take questions directly orally during today's event. However, you can put questions in the Q&A box, which you should see either at the top or the bottom of your screen, depending on the device and operating system that you're using. So please do contribute through the chat box with comments and any questions in the Q&A box. Now, it is a British Council event, and we're very proud to bring this to you, to our audience today. And as part of this, we want to ensure that this is an inclusive event. So we have included Burmese translation in the event. This is simultaneous interpretation. If you look on the menu in your Zoom platform, you should see a globe icon of like a world. And by clicking on that, you can choose either English language or Burmese language, and you can choose, if you prefer, sign language interpretation. So those are available to all of our audience today. Final housekeeping notes. You will note that the event is being recorded. Although we cannot see your face, we cannot hear your voice because the video and microphones are off. We may see your name if you put a question in the Q&A box. Therefore, you can choose to ask questions anonymously if you prefer, and your name will appear in the chat if you add a comment, and the chat box is recorded as part of the Zoom platform. So just to make you aware of that during the event. At the end of today's session, there is a survey. We very much appreciate your feedback in filling in the survey. And upon completion of the survey, you will get an e-certificate for attending today's event. So by completing the survey, there is a reward in addition to providing your feedback to us, which is much appreciated. Last point, we do have an email address here from the British Council, again, as part of our inclusive offer and to ensure that this is a safe place for everyone attending the event. We have this email address, so you can get in touch with us if you feel there's something that is sensitive or inappropriate in today's event, and let us know to allow us to act on that. The guidelines are also here for you to go through. These are the British Council Safeguarding and Online Safety Guidelines, and this PPT will be shared after today's event on the registration page for you to access that. So thank you very much for any feedback that you provide. Okay, on to today's event. So again, my name is Fraser Buick. I'm an academic consultant with the British Council, and I am the facilitator today. Our speakers, more importantly, are Sun Myut, Professor at the University of Global Peace, and Kaim Pyu Tut, Education Advisor at the British Embassy, and they kindly allowed me to call them Sun and Kaim for today's event. So just to give you an idea of today's schedule, it is a 70-minute session. As before, once I finish speaking, which will be very soon, we have a 40-minute presentation, a joint presentation by our two speakers. At the end of that, we have approximately 20 minutes for Q&A, where we'll take your questions from the Q&A box. We do find that there's often more questions than we can answer in the event, so we would ask to add the questions, and if we can't answer them live, we will try to do so in writing and post them with the PPT and recording at the end of today's event, or indeed 1 week hence, once everything is collected. Finally, we'll be sharing the survey and some useful resources for you at the end, so please do stick with us until the end. And thank you again for your participation today on behalf of myself and the British Council, and of course our speakers. And now, without further delay, I would like to hand over to our speakers. And first of all, Sun, I'll hand over to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Fraser. Thank you so much for this opportunity to facilitate the webinar titled English in a Multilingual World, specific to the Myanmar scenario. As the title implies, it is a setting of many languages, different languages, and we do have awareness of the diversity in Myanmar, but until recently, we are not aware of the rights of the minority languages, and where does the English language fit in? A successful international lingua franca. So I hope to give some takeaway message for our colleagues here, our teachers, on how to teach English language effectively while being sensitive to the need of the ethnic minorities and the role of the dominant language. So I would like to go first of all to the concept of multilingualism and translanguaging. As you can see here, multilingualism stands for the group and translanguaging stands for the individual. A group of people, like societies, institutions, are interacting in different languages is a concept of the manifestation of multilingualism. Why if we look at language, multi-language at the individual levels, the capability or the ability of an individual, a person to use multiple languages in a given scenario is known as translanguaging. And these concepts are gaining ground in the current multilingual setting. So to actually understand and grasp the concept of multilingualism, we need to be aware of the fact that there are very few nations in the world which just use or speak only one language. Even very small countries use multiple languages, like 20 something. So I would like to raise your awareness of multilingualism based on the ASEAN scenario. I would like to go to the next slide. So a very quick exercise for you. On the left-hand side, you can see the number of languages. On the right, you can see the countries. So what you have to do is you have to match the correct number of languages with the correct name of the country. So let's say we have about 1 minute. Let's go. Thank you so much for your contribution. And most of you are assigned 120 languages to Myanmar, and the 700 correctly are to Indonesia. And the correct answers will be shown in the next slide. So as you can see here, even a very small country like Brunei has 17 languages. And the largest country in ASEAN, Indonesia, with its many islands, have the largest diversity of languages, like 700, and Myanmar lies somewhere in between. So officially, some people say there are 135 different languages, but we need official confirmation. So let's say it is just 100 plus languages. So based on this, I would like to hand over to our speaker, our teacher Kanju, to further expand on the concept of our lingua franca and multilingualism. Teacher Kanju?
Yes, thank you so much. I'm really grateful for the chance to speak together with Saya and to be with you all today at this great webinar series of the British Council. This is such an important topic, so it's hard to cover everything in a short time, but I'll try my best. So let me share the slide again. What you are seeing is English as a lingua franca. As Saya has been saying, the world is becoming more and more multilingual and highlighting the importance of a common language or a bridge language between groups of people who speak different languages. And we all know that English is such an important language with about more than 3 billion people speaking English worldwide, and the world's total population is also 8 billion. So you can see it's almost 50% of the world's population. They use English either as a mother tongue or a second language or a foreign language. So English is also the first world language, and it is also the first global lingua franca. So let's go a bit deeper into what lingua franca means. So lingua franca, as the definition is given here, it is language for communication between groups of people who speak different languages. So it's like a bridge. For example, internally speaking, even within one country like India, India has 22 official languages, but the most used lingua francas are English and Hindustani. And if we use globally again, as I have been saying before, there are more than 3 billion speakers of English, and it is the first world global language. So we know that it is a very important language, and it has been having increased importance in education. We have to pursue further studies, mainly through education in most cases, and it is also the trade language and also the language of opportunity, saying if you want a good job, you must know English or you must be proficient in English. So knowing English has become an essential skill for anyone who wants to succeed professionally or academically in this world. Um, but at the same time, we need to be aware of what comes with this importance. So in this slide, I would like to look a little bit deeper into the use of English in the multilingual world, or when English is used in translanguaging, how effectively it can be. And here, by effectiveness, I would like to look at three key things or areas, like effectiveness by means of mutually beneficial to other groups of people and to other speakers of other languages. And secondly, fairness or inclusivity. As in the field of education, we have to be really inclusive. And then the third and the most important probably is the sustainability. So if we measure these uh, in these terms, for effective use of English, the first thing that is needed is a fair language policy to ensure that English is integrated into society without having negative impacts on the first languages or mother tongues or the host cultures and local identities of the learners of English. And the second, which is also very relevant to our classrooms and teachers, is whether we can teach English effectively. And the third point is beyond the classrooms as well, whether our mother tongue heritage is respected in teaching and learning English. And then if we look beyond further at the national level, for countries who are to adopt English in a wide function, they should be having compulsory education policy for their citizens. And the last but definitely not the least is there should not be mismatch between policy and practice. By policy and practice mismatch, I mean, for example, if we are favoring English, but if we don't have resources to favor it, or if we don't have reasonable support to teachers and learners, this is a sort of policy and practice mismatch. So, what do all these things mean for ASEAN context? So here I would like to give you a tiny exercise. You will be seeing 6 countries in the list: Thailand, Cambodia, Indonesia, Vietnam, Malaysia, and Myanmar. And then there comes a tiny exercise. Which countries do you think have evident or obvious mismatch in language policy and practice? So you will need to choose 3 countries from the given list. So I can give you like 10 seconds for that. Okay, your time's almost up. 1, 2, 3. So the 3 countries which have mismatched in language policy and practice, according to Save the Children and the language specialist Kosonam, Indonesia, Myanmar, and Vietnam. Sadly, Myanmar is in the list, saying that we have obvious mismatch in language policy and practice. Why is it so? Let's look a little bit further. So we have a lot of challenges. Although we recognize that English is important in today's multilingual world, for Myanmar context, there are very big challenges. The first one is, according to the language, a very prominent language specialist, Professor Kirkpatrick, Myanmar is only an expanding circle country, by which he means English in Myanmar is used not even as a second language or a mother tongue, it is a foreign language. That means we don't use English to go to the market. We don't use English with our family members. So it is a foreign language in most parts of Myanmar. And the second point is we have vague and inconsistent language policy for decades. We have Burmese as the main language, which means that Burmese is promoted, but at the same time, English is also favored. So which puts a lot of pressure on ethnic states and regions and ethnic groups, and it also causes disregard of mother tongues and even the main language. Okay, so if we bring things closer to the classrooms, can we teach effectively? Can we teach English effectively in classrooms? So I don't mean that is applicable to all classrooms. That touch point is more relevant to state school, which mainly provides education in Myanmar. Like 92% of education provision is done by state schools. So if we look at state schools, even at the teacher educators level who have been training teachers, their level of English is at A0 level in speaking, which means they can't properly speak in English, which is a very important skill. And then things might have improved a little bit beyond 2014, but we know the disruptions that have been taking place. So we can guess what the situation can be like now, which might not be too far from that situation. And then according to the teaching methodology survey as well, in the comprehensive education sector review, it was found out that the teaching methodology was really outdated. When a language is taught, it should not be taught. It's like in the past, or maybe even now, teachers read passages aloud, students listen and repeat, and the teacher explains the difficult words. That's the way most classrooms are teaching English. With that sort of teaching methodology, how far do you expect English can be used effectively? And then the last point is teaching learning resources. We have very limited use of digital technology in our schools. We don't even have good listening or audio materials. And throughout for now, we have almost none or limited internal collaboration and exposure. So these are the great challenges that we have been facing. So as I have been saying, this is a very important topic. So it will take a lot more time and research to dig deep into how we can solve the situation. But I do recognize the importance of classrooms and the role of teachers. So I would like to hand over back to Sayaji to give you some tips, some practical tips in teaching English in a fair way to other languages as well. So it is hard to give tips on such a broad and important topic, but hopefully we can keep on exploring these things together. So over to Siaji.
Yeah, let's try. So, no easy and ready-made solutions to such a deep issue. And although it seems like the challenges are insurmountable, I do believe in our teachers, their capacity and their dedication. And uh, picking up on what teacher Kampyu has said, there's an obvious mismatch between policy and the practice. Policy statement is one, the practice could be very different, and what is said, it is what is not done. So basically, it is not the weakness of our teachers, the human resource, our valuable resources. All they need to do is, I think, until recently, very recently, we are not aware of the identities and diversity of ethnic minorities, and those people are just, like wallflowers. They are just there to decorate our living rooms. And only lately we become aware of the diversity, and many ethnic minorities, are, becoming obvious or prominent in the course of last few years. So how we teachers, our teachers, recognize the diversity and try to have respect for their culture and identity, and at the same time try to, bring them forward into the multilingual setting. So to do this, I think there are several things we need to do. Our first thing as you can see on this PowerPoint, language learning activities in a multilingual setting can be introduced. These are available online and offline, so you can find it easily. What we need to do is become aware of the fact that our brothers and sisters, our brethren, ethnic minorities, they deserve to be recognized. And the fact that their language are the same as their languages are the same as ours, right? They need to be respected. And in the classroom, like teacher Kampyu mentioned, we need to think about inclusion. The inclusion is a very important thing, and helping them to gain a firm foundation in their own language first, try to understand the deeper concept of the word, and later try to, transition gradually, well, with the help of teachers, obviously in classroom, but if we can provide them resources like libraries, why can't they do it themselves? We've seen lots of, outstanding examples of our kids from all backgrounds, Mama and other brothers, sisters, our brethren, are making their way in the world. So our first thing first, referring to the first line in this PowerPoint, inside the classroom, if our teachers, number one, need to be aware of the diversity and try to, implement inclusion. To do that, we need to have learning activities, not, how do you call it, overnight, but we need to do it in a graded steps so they can, get used to the transition and so that they have successful progress. What do we mean by successful progress? It means the development of mutual understanding and the classroom rapport and dynamics in which the multilingual people, they are using their own languages and they are speaking freely among themselves using different languages and appreciating each other identity. At the same time, not forgetting the role of the English language, which is a lingua franca, which is a ticket to success for many people and professionally, academically. So we can't, ignore the fact. So to do this, we need to do some research, as I've mentioned on this PowerPoint. We need to recognize and do research on difficulties faced by our learners. What kind of difficulties can they face? In the first place, just imagine about a scenario in which different kids are speaking their own languages and the dominant language people and the ethnic minority, who do you think would win? So that would be one difficulty they need to overcome. And also, understanding a new language. They are not supposed to sit for in the exam. Just to appreciate each other identity, they just learn it, right? Out of their respect. So they will face difficulties for sure. How do we overcome those difficulties and transition to the major language? And to do this, on the second point, we need to make a careful selection of topics appropriate to the needs of our learners and activities which are stimulating, motivating, and also are helping us, the teachers, to achieve the lesson aim. And to do this, I think we need to test the materials. We need to test the materials with our teachers. And this is actually happening right now. And due to our recognition of the ethnic minorities, right? And many people are developing their own materials. And there are many fruitful, results we have gained so far. So we need to create the materials, and then we need to test the materials with teachers, and they can use it in the classroom. And based on their experience in the classroom, we can revise the curriculum. This is our cyclic process, which will take, our, planning, implementation, and review, and right. So this will be a process in which our teachers here and beyond will be involved. So, can we move to the next slide? Now, just to demonstrate some of the activities we can use in the multilingual classroom, and here are I have a poem, and I'm sure there's some of our teachers here are maybe they're Malay friends, and I would like to apologize to you in advance if I can't do any justice to this. I know that your language is a majority language, but just to demonstrate a multilingual setting. Okay, so right, so when we introduce a poem in the classroom, as we can see on the right-hand side, we need to help our friends. If the native speaker child is leading the activity, it will be the student. If the teacher herself or himself is leading, it'll be the teacher. So what they can do is help with pronunciation. And you know very well that pronunciation is the fun part. They will mispronounce, they will laugh, they will joke. That's the best part about learning. And next thing they need to say what the rhyme is about. Tell their friends, their students, the meaning of the rhyme. And a very simple step, model reading, and whole class read together. And our teachers here, as you are really used to the teaching steps, in a classroom, you can make it, motivating. Like you can add some TPR to the physical response or miming and stuff. Let's say, for instance, the word here, bel compol. In the first line, bel compol means together or get together, right? So we need to tell our friends the pronunciation, all right? And some of the words, like in the fourth line, we said bel sugar. Bolsuker. Actually, in some version of the Malay, I'm sure they include the sound R, but for most part, they just say the short Bolsuker and rear. So here comes some model reading. Um, let's imagine you're the class. Here we go. Bila kita berkumpul, bila kita berkumpul, bersukaria. Kawanku, kawanmu, kawanmu, kawanku, bila kita berkumpul, bersukaria. Okay, that's the one anyway, right? I hope. I mean, the kids will be very happy for sure, right? They're not reading any classroom material. They're having fun. That's the best part. So the rhyme is great. Teacher can view. The next part is even better. It is clap the word. Clap the word. Clapping is a very physical activity, and is very motivating. I think our children would love some movement in the classroom. But the aim of clapping is to identify a word. Whenever they hear a word, they clap, right? So they can clap and recognize the word, and later maybe they can pronounce it much, much better. So here we go. I would like to demonstrate how to clap the word. Here I go again. Just the word, please remember. Not every word, just the word welcome. Whenever the kids hear the word welcome, they have to clap. Bila kita berkumpul, berkumpul, berkumpul. Bila kita berkumpul, bersukaria. Kawanku, kawanmu, kawanmu, kawanku. Bila kita berkumpul, bersukaria. I'm struggling. So this is one example of how to introduce, multilingual, a new language to a multilingual setting. And I'm sure, and you must know very well, that it's very motivating for the classroom because it's a rhyme. It involves physical activity. And if you want further materials, I have good news. There are lots of similar materials online. So you can go there and try to recognize the needs of our ethnic minorities and use them. Our next step in the next slide, it is the meaning, right? So you can also give some detailed meanings either in writing or just from what's above, they can just explain orally, right? So doing this would be really useful for our kids, not just for the ethnic minority, the kids, but the children from dominant majority. They get to learn about the culture and their the language a little bit, not everything, of the minority, and at the same time, uh, the rule of the lingua franca. I mean, the ticket to success. English is still there, so nobody hurts. I would say everybody wins. It's a win-win-win situation, if I may say so. It's a win for the ethnic minority children because they are recognized, they are appreciated, right? They are included, and it's a win-win situation for the language itself. It's a win-win situation for our kids. Let's say in our specific scenario, for markets, because for markets are not air, it's not their fault really aware of the diversity of the cultures and languages, right? So uh, in majority entertainment industries, the minority languages are included mostly part of the comedy. They just a comedy rather than being appreciated. So you can realize what's happening. Yeah, so far. And I would say the English language itself is a win-win winner ever because everyone goes for English. It is a ticket to success. It's a ticket to how do you employability, right? So everybody wins in this situation. Um, can we go to the next slide? So some of the tips for you, teachers, when our children are allowed to use their mother tongue, they're very confident. They are at home with their own language and they learn the, deeper concepts, more complex concepts of the world in their own language. And they have a very firm foundation in the first language. And that's crucial, I would say, because understanding of the local language and culture before acquiring the lingua franca is essential. And you can find these theories and practices and in linguistics and all those language studies area. And it would give them an opportunity to interact with majority. So first thing first, teachers need to be aware of the diversity, appreciate differences, try to recognize it, try to include the ethnic minority students in the conversation, and try to learn about them. Only then there would be really positive classroom atmosphere and classroom rapport would be the result. And that would result in, further progress towards the acquisition of the dominant language or to go further, the acquisition of the lingua franca. Uh, so I would like to hand over to Teacher Kaimpu to give a wrap-up comment.
Thank you so much, Siaji. So the importance of English is not to be downgraded at all. That's not the purpose of this webinar. What we are trying to do is to create a win-win situation, as Siaji has been saying. Yes, English is really important in the multilingual world. We use English for translanguaging, but at the same time, we need to look at our country context and then think what implications there are for Myanmar. So when we talk about language policy, this is the first need for effective use of English in the multilingual world. When we look at English, uh, how is it used in Myanmar, the language policy here? And we all know that uh, we have mismatch in policies and practices. So for example, we have prescribed text in English, but teachers are not prepared to use English as the medium of instruction. And then we have exams set only in English, but at the same time, many students are failing in that area. So we all know the importance of English. We need to learn English, but at the same time, we need to be aware that English is not always natural, which means you learn it without even going to any classes. It is not natural to everyone. And it is also not neutral and beneficial for everyone. So we can see the growing social divide in our country between those who can speak English fluently, who can learn English in a proper way, and for those who can't speak English and then who don't have chances to learn English. So what can we do to bridge that social divide? Because English language learning shall not be a one-way process, it can be a two-way engagement like Sayaji has demonstrated. There should be engagements among different languages. And we are also recognizing more and more of the opportunity cost. So when you do something, you can't do the others. So for example, if we spend a lot of time and money in learning English, which is good, but at the same time, you might be disregarding your own mother tongues or the main language which is needed to be used in Myanmar. So that's what we call the opportunity cost. So how do we have an effective language policy? What will be the suggestions? Because if we are to form a policy, it should not be a top-down policy without checking what the classrooms are facing as challenges or what the teachers are facing as challenges. So I just would like to advocate from here. Yes, we can promote English, but we need effective language policy and a reasonable one it should be and a fair one for all. So I would like to open a discussion with you all because there are implications for classrooms from this webinar today. And I would like to term them as the debate tables. So the debate tables mean it is open to discussion. Anyone can have, his or her own idea. There cannot be only one right or wrong answers because answers vary by context and who you are and where you are from. So these 3 points we can debate on, or you can also comment on them. The first is whether, in Myanmar, whether English should be used as a medium of instruction for non-English subjects. So you will see that at the university level, you will also see that English is encouraged according to our language policy to be used as medium of instruction at the upper secondary level, especially in science subjects like English, not English, mathematics, chemistry, physics. So that's the one we can have our views on. And the second point is whether textbooks should be in English for non-English subjects. That is also related to the first point. If the textbooks are prescribed in English and if teachers cannot manage those textbooks written in English, what can they do? They can just ask their students to learn them by heart in chunks, which is not fair for the students at all. And the third point is that we have always been saying, probably at the lip service level, that we should recognize everyone's rights, etc. But are we prioritizing the mother tongues of ethnic languages at an early age? Are we doing that enough? And if we are not doing that enough, how do we prioritize mother tongues? Or do you want to do these things at all? These are what I would really like to hear from you all. So let me wrap up this webinar with those 3 debatables, and then I and Zia welcome any of your comments or feedback. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much to both of you for that engaging and practical presentation. So I think we had a real mix of principles and ideas looking at the bigger picture, but also some real practical ideas for teachers who I believe make up a lot of our audience today. So thank you so much for that. And some real questions to be answered. And of course, we hope to address some now. We've wrapped up the presentation, but not the webinar just yet. We'll have a short Q&A now based on the questions that we've received. And thank you everyone so much for adding questions in the Q&A box. Just to reiterate, we may not be able to ask them all today, but we'll do our best to do so in writing after today's event and share them with the recording and the PPTs. So let's just jump right into it if we can. I'd like to, and I think today's webinar really opened my eyes to just the sheer number of different languages within not only the region, but within each country, in particular the activity you did at the beginning of today, Sun. As for example, 700 languages in Indonesia and the number of languages in Myanmar. So Yan Nyang Tun asked a question, and this is focusing on the classroom, because I think today in particular we would like to look at the classroom aspect. How can we teach English as a target language effectively in the classroom with the students speaking multiple different ethnic languages? So are there any other specific tips that you might give to teachers in this context? I'll open that to, soon you have your microphone off, so I'll start with yourself if that's okay.
Oh yeah, so in the multilingual setting, the kids speaking are, sorry, the power cut just happened, so my camera is dark, so sorry about that. In that setting, I would say it will be very challenging, and there should be some common language used by the teacher, or how diverse can be the students. I mean, if you go to my place, I belong to ethnic minority. Mon is pretty unitary, but they have some issues speaking Burma, and their Burma language happens to be rather than a helpful facilitating language, it becomes a barrier for them to go the English language. So that's the practical situation there. So another thing is, if, let's say, for instance, there are people using different languages, I think the teacher can sort of work up something, some common ground, And for the students, let's say, for instance, we even have methodologies to teach English in English, right? So we can simplify the stages and we can introduce the words using their, different mediums like the visuals, auditory, and repetition, and all those methods. There's so many different ways to do that, but the teachers need to be aware of the student needs, what they need. So even without reverting to the minority languages, there are ways to teach the language. But even then, I just wonder if the local languages would be more diverse than 3 or 4, because in my place there's only one. And
Okay.
Kachin State, I know that there's Shan and Kachin and Lisu, just that, and they can speak each other language. So that's my take on it, Fraser.
Yep, that's great. I think it's a good point. I mean, there's obviously cases where there may be one other language, but in other contexts there may be 4, 5, 6, 7 within a single classroom. So the teacher has to deal with that. And I think you've mentioned different media that could perhaps go beyond language to help get points across as well. And to touch on that, I'd like to extend that a little bit, Kind. There's another question from Sansan Yint that asks about employing daily life topics to perhaps take away some of the difficulties that students have, i.e. improving engagement, motivation of the students, and perhaps making it more relevant to them to help them learn. Do you think that's a good approach for teachers?
Yes, I think that is a good approach. That is matching the teaching learning process to the students' need. So it's like making learning relevant to life. Because in general education sector as well, what we have been hearing as a very prominent feedback is that the learning that Myanmar students have been receiving is not relevant to their life. It's like they cannot use it back after getting their degrees or after finishing their secondary education. So it is really an interesting area to explore how we can make things more relevant to students. And there again, my thinking, my personal thinking is that we should give more space to teachers and students, not just the policy makers or the decision makers at the top level. We should listen to the students' voice, what they really need, because I can see Myanmar youths, they have a lot of intelligence and then they have a lot of caliber that they can contribute to. And Myanmar teachers, they have almost always been put at the receiving end that you do this, you follow this, and then I ask you to, follow my instructions. And then teachers, they have to meekly follow orders. It is not a good way for the classrooms. So teachers should not always be placed at the passive role. They should also be consulted at every key decision-making level. And I know that for such a varied and wide country, we will not be able to follow only one uniform level in all the regions and areas. So there should be, region specific or area specific or even school specific, like in the other countries, like good
Yeah,
school leadership. And the school leaders can set up what is needed most for his or her students. Thank
yeah.
you.
So certainly leadership, educational leadership, school leadership will be important in promoting that and ensuring that the students' voices are heard. We're seeing a number of comments in the comment box as well that have supported some of your earlier points about English being used for English language subjects rather than for other subjects, content subjects, for example. And again, that's relating to the need of the student within those contexts as well. So I think those are really important points, Sun. I'm glad you've made it back. Sorry to hear about the power cut. Um, so I think we're looking at this, and I think there are certainly bigger questions that we have to answer. But again, I'd like to stay around the classroom for a moment, and I'd like to go back to something that you actually mentioned, kind in part of your presentation, and you referred to outdated methods still being used by teachers that perhaps hindered effective teaching of English. And I wonder if, because the word outdated, of course, has a negative connotation, uh, is it always a negative thing to use some of the methods that you highlighted, or is it sometimes necessary within the context of students, for example, not having enough language to follow the teacher and therefore learning by rote or by heart may be the only solution that teachers have in supporting these students?
Thanks, Fraser. You made a very good point. So actually, I should not be using a strong term because teachers they have to respond to the situation they are in. And when they are not empowered enough, and then when they don't have enough resources, or when the class size is so big, and when they are not prepared well, when they don't have, continuous professional development opportunities, there are lots of other things, we can uh, take into consideration why a teacher is teaching in that way. Of course, teachers, most of the teachers, they have the well-being of students at their heart, so they would like to do their best, but at the same time, the conditions may not be right. The environment may not be supportive. So, and to answer the second part of your question as well, listening to the teacher, repeating after the teacher, I don't mean that they are bad in every situation. Sometimes we need to repeat after the teacher, we need to, practice the word, and then we also need to know the meaning of difficult vocabularies. But if these things are used repeatedly with tiny children, then it's tedious and boring. So for that remark, I myself followed the consultant Helen Drennan in those days in her visit of state schools. And then she was really saddened because tiny little children, they were doing that hours after hours. It's like killing their imagination and passion for learning since a very early stage. So it depends on the context, timing, and resources.
So your comment was predominantly about very young children in terms of these activities, or when you said outdated activities, it was more about the younger children where we could change them and adapt them to make them more interesting and to promote that creativity and engagement among students. Right. Um, uh, Soon we have a number of questions coming in. Again, just to reiterate, we won't be able to ask them all, unfortunately, today, but we will get on to them after today's event. So you will be able to see a Q&A sheet with our materials next week, I hope. But I'd like to cover a few that are here now. And this is an interesting question because I'm not sure if the answer is something that the person asking the question would want to hear, but it asks, how do I teach English to a student who wants to speak more in their mother tongue? So rather than ask you that question directly, I'd like to ask your opinion of that question. Is it necessary? Is it really something we should be encouraging, or is it something we should be discouraging? Soon, if I could put that to you, first of all. If you'd like me to repeat the question, please let me know. You're on mute.
Sorry, I was muted. So it's teaching of English to some ethnic minority children who just wants to use his own language, right? So
Yes.
specifically in this case, it is more. So I don't think such a scenario exists. Students are they need exposure. If they are exposed to a new language, they are like in everyday language, they are copycats. They like imitating, and they like having fun. And rather than sitting still inside the classroom listening to the teachers, that's what we did. And we we love our teachers, but they were told to use those approaches, and we couldn't see the connection between the ABC and the picture of the tree and the pronunciation trees. We can't make any connection because we are sitting there. So there's no physical activity involved, no tactile, no kind of type of thing. So when a child is exposed to such an active and motivating learning situation, I've learned about a 15 years old girl, Myanmar girl, are already speaking 5 languages very well. I have another friend who is 27 years old, speaking 7 languages. So language is something we just pick up. I mean, uh, the issue of the child doesn't want to learn is, I think, a temporary thing. We just need to create the right condition and motivate that child
Well, it's
in
not
there.
necessarily
Yes.
they don't want to
Yeah.
learn. I think the question is around they want to use their mother language as opposed to English. So I think the insinuation is the teacher would like to use English, but the student does not. Um, I think we go back to Kai's point of we need to listen to the student and what the student's needs are. Would you then advocate that the teacher should use the mother tongue rather than English, even in an English language class? if that's what the student would like. Soon?
Is it about the student's preference?
Yes,
I think
I
it's
believe
yeah,
so.
yeah. I would say, our teachers are the organizer, the manager of the classroom, and they know if they want to they have a lesson objective in which they teach certain words, like 7 words in one lesson, and the use of mother tongue and in combination with the English. I can't see many teachers doing that. They would just use the Mon language to teach English.
Mhm.
So the Mon would be the majority, and
Right.
it would be pepper with a bit of English here and there. So yes, I would say it's the use of in the multilingual sense, there's no question about including, or how do you call it, not including the mother tongue, because we are trying to recognize the identity, make it inclusive, right? At the same time, we can transition gradually, like I suggested earlier, to the target language. So, and there are many ways to do that, apart from catering for the student preference. So I don't know whether I answered the question.
No, I think it's an interesting one because there are parallels to some extent with foreign teachers. And I say foreign teachers generally meaning, and this term I use very loosely, native speaking teachers in teaching in countries that are not their own, where they may learn a few words in the language or a language of that country and they try to use that in the classroom, but they still predominantly use English. And I wonder if the experience of the student is similar in these contexts where you say Mon is the dominant language and the student may or may not, I assume they will understand Mon, but the teacher's use of the ethnic language to help the students could actually be, could it be a distraction or could it be something that actually confuses the student if this teacher is not proficient in that language?
In that instance, I think in the most case, when any English teacher or any other teacher, Filipino, Malaysian, whatever, if they use a single Myanmar word, we consider it an honor. That, oh, you know Myanmar words. So lately, I was involved in tree project and effect project, and the facilitators are encouraged to learn Myanmar
Okay.
and to use it now and then. So to create a rapport with the local people. So it is one example I would say of there are facilitators trying to make it inclusive,
Uh,
them to be part of the local society.
Would
And
that apply?
yeah,
Would that apply in local context as well when the teacher is from Myanmar? Also building rapport with the students, it's a good idea to use the ethnic language where possible to do so. Should they, should the students speak different languages?
I would say the teacher should adapt to the situation. I mean, if he or she is assigned to that particular place, I mean, they need to get used to the people and the language. What's there's nothing to lose in learning a new language, right? So most people are, as far as I know, people who work in ethnic minority areas, they pick up at least a few words, and some of them, even a British Garrett Butt, our colleague, picked up Thai when he was in Thailand, and he can speak Myanmar very well at the
Great.
intermediate level. So nobody is shocked when he speaks Myanmar, right? So we consider it an honor that someone is interested in our language. So yeah.
That's wonderful to hear. Um, Kyan, if I come back to you, there's another interesting question from Zinmes Sol, and again, I apologize if I don't pronounce that correctly. With different languages, multilingual context, then inevitably there are different cultures within or attached to those languages. So this person, and I'm not sure if it's male or female because I'm not familiar, unfortunately, with the names, but to what extent should we integrate culture teaching in multilingual or ELT classrooms? And I think within Myanmar, really, this question would focus on.
Yes, thank you so much. So I think cultural understanding also contributes greatly to better harmony and then more meaningful engagement in communications. So if we understand each other's culture, we know where he or she is coming from. So it is good to encourage, for students to learn from each other. So what they do, and then we don't do it nominally, we have to do it deeply, of course, if there is time and chances to do so. So it's not like, just a day marking that. It is good, but at the same time, we can go deeper. So these things can be brought into the classrooms and into the content of the language classroom itself to study each other so that, not one language is dominating the others. So that sort of inclusiveness helps beyond the classrooms for peace and better harmony. Thanks.
Thank you. I think that also perhaps relates back to the question of putting kind of almost daily, I say daily activities, but certainly topics that are relevant to people daily and integrating them into the classroom. This could be culture, for example. From a teacher perspective, you could have every Friday we focus on a different culture as a routine as part of the teaching program, and that way we can balance it across the term or the semester. So I think that's a really interesting approach. I'd like to read a comment actually in the chat because we're getting a balance of comments here. It's certainly in support of some of the topics or the comments we're making in the presentation, and others who have slightly opposing ideas, which of course is perfectly fine in such a debate. So we have one comment from Christy that says, I don't agree with text will be appropriate in mother tongue language because if we have the plan for the quality of education to follow the international standards too, the textbooks will still be in English. So the challenge is for us to develop our skills as teachers to be qualified and teach our students well. So I think in Christie's sense, she believes that it's about the teachers, it's their responsibility to develop and be able to present the English in a way that students understand rather than change. Would you like to make any comment on that? It's a perfectly legitimate point from
Yes,
Christie.
yes, that's a very good point. So I can see that there are pros and cons, and then there are different views. And I think it will depend on who the student is and what he wants, of course. And then these interests will also vary. But at the same time, one thing to note is that yes, having textbooks in English helps with communication and then reaching farther in the English language or English dominant areas. But at the same time, what I have been seeing and hearing as feedback myself is that non native speakers of English will never be able to reach to the level of native speakers. So, this is like a key drawback to them. So, and the other side of the thing is that countries like Japan, they have their own texts in Japan. And then it's not just Japan, in many other advanced countries as well. They have their texts in Japan, but they are well advanced in science and technology and everything. It may be that their English language skills is not that good, but still they are maintaining their country well and then progressing quite well. So I'm not opposing Christine's view, but I'm trying to balance the view.
Mhm.
Thanks.
So when you say they have textbooks in Japan, do you mean in Japanese, in the language of Japan? So not only in English, so there's local languages in these countries as well. Okay, thank you very much for that. Sun, are you still with us? No, perhaps the power cut has reemerged.
Sorry,
Um,
I'll be back here. I'm
okay,
back.
you are back. Welcome back. Um,
So I
so
think Saya is back, Saya-san. I think he can also comment on the use
yes,
of,
I was just going
English.
to ask.
Yeah, thank you. So
Absolutely.
over.
Just to round this up, would you have a final comment on that, please, Sun? Thank you, Kai.
Can you elaborate on that point first, please? Sorry.
It was in relation to, I think the discussion was really about Christie's comment in the chat. I can read it out for you again. It's I'm afraid I've lost it in the chat as it's moved up. Um, I'll have to find it again. I think it's basically it was around it's teachers should improve themselves, be qualified in order to present textbooks in English to students, rather than having to rely on local languages, if I could paraphrase that very much. So Kang's point is that it's possible to also have textbooks in local language. For example, in Japan, they have this, and they as a country are very successful in many ways. So do you have any comments on that in relation, particularly, I think, to the textbook language?
Yeah. I do partially agree with her. I mean, it's about the the classroom situation and the teacher qualification and the ethnic minority issues, I think I can find three issues there. So whatever happens is the teacher's job to deliver the lesson in English. So that's one point. It's very good. I mean, and it can give if the teacher is really qualified, it can give the quality language input to the kids. And they are very lucky, of course. But we have been, are a bit, dreaming in the romantic, picture of the native English speakers, Myanmar, speaking authentic English thing. And I've been teaching many such students, and they do speak very good English. And at the same time, they can speak Myanmar language very well. But in the ethnic minority setting, the teacher may be qualified and he or she can deliver the lesson in English. At the same time, the issue here, I believe, is about respect and identity and inclusion. So basically, I think it is not about just learning the language. It is about recognizing them as, a race diversity, and also recognize that they have a literature, they have a culture, and even if the teacher is teaching English, he or she can include some features from the target language, ethnic minority language. So it is fine to use English. Teachers can be very qualified, but I just wonder if really well-qualified teachers would go to far-flung area, remote places to, do these things. I have some doubt about that, but yeah, I do agree with her that I've been teaching our students with some of them near native speaker fluency.
Yeah.
But at the same time, these are just minority, very small snapshot of the
Thank
whole
you.
picture. Yeah.
I think that there's some great points there. I think, it's not just a kind of an exodus from cities of qualified teachers to smaller context. I assume teachers in these uh, rural context, for example, if they do become qualified, they may move to the cities as well in the other direction, and those areas would lose those resources. But I think what I've taken from today's discussion is really the key is the student and what the students' needs are, what their abilities are, and showing respect for their culture and their language. And as part of that, as something we touched on at the beginning of today's webinar, is inclusion, including everyone within the classroom. So teachers will have to adapt to the context within which they work. But thank you so much to both of you for your contributions today. It's really been insightful for me and also to the contributions of our audience. I think there have been some great comments that I couldn't read out. And really, there's 26 questions in the Q&A box at the moment that we haven't been able to answer. So really, some great interaction. And just again, to reiterate, we will be trying to answer those in writing and sharing them with you with the PPT and the recording. Now, I'm going to share my screen again just to share some final resources. So thank you everyone for hanging on till the end today. First of all, I'd like to touch on the survey. It's really great to get your feedback on today's event. We love to hear from you, and it helps us to adapt and improve the events that we hold. There is an e-certificate at the end of this survey, so please do take a picture of this QR code if you can't do it right now, and you can scan and enter the survey for later to get that e-certificate and, of course, to give your feedback. Here are some resources I'd like to share with you. These are taken from the British Council Teaching English website. The left-hand side is a webinar, another webinar focusing on practical tips for teachers within multilingual context in I believe it's Pakistan or India. I've gone from the top of my head there, but it's actually a very interesting webinar for those of you who have time to watch. And of course, some great tips using multilingual approaches and moving from theory to practice. So again, supporting the teachers in today's event and having something else to take away apart from the great contributions of our speakers in their presentations. One additional point, for those of you who have been joining us for the past few webinars, you will know that in October we have a British Council ASEAN Teaching English online conference with over 20 separate events from different countries within the region. We now have this QR code available to you to register for that. Select the events you'd like to attend. There are events from Myanmar and from other countries within the region, and we'd really love you to join us for those events. So please, again, if you can, take a quick snapshot of that. When you do go to this, you'll find a registration page. It is Zoom, similar to the platform today. And from that, you can choose the events that you wish to attend. You will have to register. This is the page you will see. All events are free, so please do join us if you can. Last plug, if you like, for future events, please do follow us on the Teaching English Asia British Council page. This is the last of our initial block of teacher takeaway webinars, but there will be a new series in November. I don't have a link for that today, but if you follow our Facebook page, you will be able to follow any updates on that and join us for those events, which will be drilling down on more practical ideas for teachers in the classroom. So a slight change in focus for those events. Please do join us for that. And that is it for today. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. A really big thank you to our speakers, Kang and Sun. Thank you so much for the insightful answers to the questions as well on the spot, which is also always a challenge, and for the questions provided to us, and of course for the comments that I couldn't read out in the chat. Thank you so much, everyone. Really, it's just for me to round up and say we hope to see you in the next Teacher Takeaway event, which will be in November, and follow the Teaching English Facebook page for more details. Thank you very much and good evening.
Thank you too. Thank you all. Bye.
Thank you all. Bye.